drawings they are inspired by, but at the same time remote from reality. They can involve imaginative scenes, poses, and characters, and most likely you would like your drawing to be extraordinarily good. All of these aspects could also be described with the word fantastic. If you want your life to be more fantastic, which then would be translated into your drawings since they are based on your own experiences, who you are as a person, then I invite you to explore this topic in more detail today. For this, we'll look at NAKDI's work, an artist who uses different elements to make their art more fantastic. I will talk more about how you can make your life more fantastic, how you can improve your life, so I hope this can be of help to you, no matter if you yourself are someone who draws or not. Hi, I'm May. Let's start with breaking down what the word fantastic can mean. The word fantastic can refer to something that's extremely impressive or attractive. It can express embracing joy, positivity, and wondrous beauty. The word can also be used to describe the divine essence within each person. Now, how do we embrace this fantastic side of ourselves? How can our lives, and in turn, potentially our art, become more fantastic? Let's find out. I'd like to start with going through different elements in NAKDI's art while also pointing out how these may be fantastic. Along the way, I'll mention how we can apply a fantastic quality or mindset in different areas of life. Lines are often the first thing that shape how a drawing feels. They guide the eye, set the rhythm, and can turn something ordinary into something fantastic with just a slight change in weight or flow. The line work balances precision and softness. The outer silhouette lines are often slightly thicker, while inner details are drawn with finer, sometimes even painterly strokes. In some areas, especially hair or flowing clothing, the lines almost dissolve into painted edges. Instead of outlining everything, edges are implied through shifts in color or shadow. There's a trust in the viewer's perception, a willingness to leave space. It reminds me of how in life, not every detail needs to be controlled or explained. For an artist, paying attention to line weight and flow isn't just a technical matter, it's also about the mood you're creating. Do your lines feel tense or relaxed? Do they hold the figure like a frame, or do they invite the viewer in like an open path? Even something as simple as a line can carry wonder. It's often in these quiet details that a sense of the fantastic begins. The anatomy in these illustrations blends stylization with a grounded sense of structure. Figures are elongated, with elegant limbs and refined silhouettes that give the characters a graceful but strong presence. There's a clear understanding of proportion beneath, and it can be selectively pushed. Longer legs, slender necks, wider chest to create something more striking than strict realism would allow. This balance between truth and interpretation gives the drawings a fantastic quality. The foundation is solid, yet it allows room for imagination to shape the figure. It's a reminder that growth often comes from knowing the structure well enough to bend it purposefully. Just like how a tree stands firm through its roots but reaches upward with flexible branches, good anatomy provides a steady base that supports creative freedom. In practice, this means understanding the basics, like gesture, proportions, and volume, before playing with exaggeration. Ask yourself, what aspect of the figure am I emphasizing and why? Is it elegance, strength, fragility? Having this intention behind your stylization makes it feel deliberate rather than random. The faces are where personality comes to life. The overall structure tends toward soft, rounded shapes for younger or more delicate characters, and longer, sharper shapes for older or more serious ones. Rather wide jaws are used for male characters. The change of direction for the face shape, which is usually a bit rounded, is further out than the outer eye corner horizontally. It's around the mouth height-wise. Male characters have wider jaws than female characters. For them, the change of direction tends to be higher up, making the face appear softer. The jaws for the faces of the female characters are a lot thinner and more elegant this way. The characters have rather wide chins. The face shape gives the characters a rather adult appearance here. Instead of relying on harsh outlines only, the inner edges of the face can fade into surrounding colors, adding softness. What stands out is how much emotion and presence can be conveyed through subtle shifts in proportion and shape. A slightly higher jawline can make a face seem more mature, fuller cheeks create youthfulness. These gentle distinctions in the face shape show that small changes can change how a face is perceived. It's a quiet reminder that in life too, subtle gestures, how we hold ourselves, how we speak, often leave lasting impressions. The word fantastic doesn't always have to refer to something loud. Sometimes it's the understated details that make something memorable. When sketching faces, consider what emotional weight the shape of the features carries and how it contributes to the overall impression of the character. Let's move on to the facial features next. The nose is portrayed with a thin line that is often slightly colored. The line tends to have a change in direction, the upper part portraying the nose bridge and the lower line the nose end. A nostril can also be added here. Often some light or a shading is added on the upper part of the nose. The nose is rather high up on the face but also not too small, adding both a cute but also mature look. For the mouth, the lips can be colored. Some characters have visible lips that can be rather thick, while other characters have no lips. There can also be a small line added beneath the mouth that adds volume to it and portrays the lower lip. The mouth outline usually has a lot of varying thickness, with mouth corners being thicker than inner parts often. The characters can have various expressions and mouths can be used to portray these. When teeth are visible, sharp teeth can also be included. The inner parts of the mouth, like the tongue, can also be included depending on the expression. The inner parts can but aren't always outlined here. Just like the mouth, the eyebrows can contribute to and be influenced by the expression of the character. They are often expressive. The thickness and shape of the eyebrows can vary depending on the character. Often eyebrows are rather thick. For more masculine characters, the eyebrows also tend to be further down. Now let's talk about what's underneath the eyebrows. The eyes often are one of the most captivating parts in an illustration. In NAKDI's art, they are framed by defined upper lashes and softer lower lines. Shapes vary: rectangular for a calm look, almond for elegance, or rounded for youthful energy. There is one line above the upper eyelash. This can be at the inner eye corner, or it can follow the upper eye shape. The line usually includes a change in direction as well. A second line can also be added above the first eye line depending on the head angle. While the shading of the iris can vary a bit from illustration to illustration, here is one method I figured out to shade eyes like in NAKDI's art. First is the base of the eye color, then we have the first shadow layer, which would be at the upper part of the iris, then a light layer for some lighted parts that can also be neon colored at the bottom. The pupil also has more than one color here usually. The upper part and outline is darker than the lower part. There usually is one highlight placed at the upper part of the iris above the pupil. It can be bigger or smaller and often has a rounded shape. In some cases the placement of it can be different or no highlights can be added as well. The layering within the eye shading gives the eyes a sense of depth and clarity that draws the viewer in. It mirrors how true vision goes beyond surface appearances. Looking deeper often reveals beauty that isn't immediately obvious. In drawing, taking the time to build eyes with care, layer by layer, can give a character their soul. Ask yourself, what feeling do you want the gaze to hold? Curiosity, warmth, intensity. Intention shows through. Shading around the eyes can also be used to further emphasize the eyes. Here a shadow beneath the eye or also above the eye, especially at the upper eye line, can be added. The shading can kind of frame the eyes here, making them stand out more and adding depth. Some blush can be added underneath the eyes as well. And other than that, the face contour can have a shaded outline. Some shading can even be added on the face, defining the face planes depending on the shading as well. The hair has a controlled flow that contributes to the fantastic impression of NAKDI's artworks. Outer lines are clean and well placed, while inner strands are suggested through thinner lines or shading. Some strands are sharply defined, others softly blended, giving the hair both structure and movement. What makes this stand out is how the hair feels alive. It frames the face intentionally, flows with the pose, and adds to the character's silhouette. Rather than over-explaining every strand, key shapes are chosen and the rest is suggested. This approach reflects the idea of focusing on what matters most and letting the rest fall into place naturally. Not everything needs to be meticulously controlled to create something beautiful. A practical takeaway is to think of hair as volumes first, strands second. Start with the overall flow and weight, then refine key edges and highlights. This creates hair that moves with the character rather than sitting stiffly on top. Shading layer-wise here is a setup I would use for a similar hair shading result. First we have a base layer. Next I added a layer for a slightly darker shade of the base and glow around the face, which gives the whole hair and head more depth and detail. In this artwork the hair has this slight gradient applied to it, adding more liveliness. The next layer would be a first shadow layer for the main part and shadow. Then, especially to separate hair parts from each other, even darker small shadows are used. You can notice that there are multiple shades per layer, which differs from most cell shadows. This suggests a multiply layer could be used to apply the shadows so they are affected by the varying base color beneath, while the shading is applied with a brush with varying opacity. A mix of both approaches could also be the case here. You can notice that around the forehead generally warmer, more orangey colors are used, while at the edges of the hair some cooler, purpley shades can be found, suggesting reflected light. All of this adds some more depth and liveliness. In one of NAKDI's YouTube videos, I also saw that before shading the hair, NAKDI first applies a soft face glow around the skin and ambient light or reflected light on outer parts of hair. Something that makes the shadows stand out even more are some saturated borders which I added on the next layer. After this we have a layer for the highlight. It actually has around the same tone as the face glow from before. Finally, for this illustration, a second highlight layer is also used, including small colorful neon highlight shapes with a darker drop shadow beneath them and a brighter outline above them. I find it interesting how this turquoise neon color really pops from the pink hair color. The turquoise color is also used on the eye or around a few shadow borders, drawing attention to different parts of the illustration. Even the small effects that are added to this artwork feature this color. Now back to the highlights. They can be included in NAKDI's illustrations and feature a bigger, slightly soft shape with sharp and sometimes blended edges. The highlights here are not that bright, they don't differ too much from the hair color except for cases like the neon highlight mentioned before. Because the artwork I used as an example here features vibrant colors, you can notice how the hair shading involves a lot of colorful hues. However, this can also change depending on the illustration. For more muted artworks focusing on black and white parts, you can notice how the hair shading colors will also be more muted. The shading colors, but also the shading style, how painterly or sharp and detailed or rough the shadows may be, depends on the illustration. Next, for features that are covered by the hair, they are either fully covered or some features such as eyelashes or eyebrows can still be visible underneath. The clothing design and rendering bring together function, storytelling, and aesthetics. Outfits are built on clear base layers, shirts, pants, or dresses, overlaid with capes, jackets, belts, and accessories. Silhouettes are clean and thoughtfully layered. Shapes like circles, diamonds, and triangles repeat across different parts of the outfit, creating visual rhythm. Patterns can flow from one clothing part into another, guiding the eye through the design. Rather modern or formal outfits tend to be included. Many belts and bags or other accessories can be added as well. The clothes are drawn with thinner lines for folds. Often the folds are also just portrayed with shading though. Here triangular shapes are common and blocky. Long strokes can be used to portray folds with varying sizes. What's particularly striking is how the clothing isn't just decorative. It reflects the character's role, personality, or setting. Flowing garments suggest elegance or freedom. Structured jackets give a sense of order and strength. This thoughtful connection between clothing and character transforms an outfit into part of the storytelling. There's a quiet wisdom here. Outer layers can reveal inner truths. In life, the clothes we choose, our actions, habits, how we talk and think often reflect something deeper. In art, designing clothing intentionally allows the viewer to understand the character before a word is spoken. The color palettes tend to be harmonious and slightly muted with strategic accents. Most outfits revolve around one or two main hues, red, blue, purple, and are supported by black, white, grey or brown. Gold is a frequent accent, adding warmth and elegance, while silver appears occasionally for cooler moods. Whites and blacks are often tinted subtly to match the overall palette, giving everything a cohesive tone. What makes the color use feel fantastic is the balance between subtlety and clarity. Instead of overwhelming saturation, colors are chosen to complement and highlight. Contrast comes through value differences and careful placement, not excess. This creates an atmosphere that feels both grounded and ethereal. When blue colors are mostly used for the background and outfit designer, this creates a nice contrast to the warmer skin tones, for example. The colors that are used tend to be influenced by the overall atmosphere of the illustration and the character. More softer colors and less contrast is used for calmer illustrations, while more vibrant colors and heavy contrast can be used for more dynamic and dramatic illustrations. In art, choosing colors thoughtfully is like setting the emotional tone of a story. In life, the colors we choose, the moods, words, and intentions we surround ourselves with also shape the atmosphere we live in. Having a strong, reliable base can help in life and art. For your artworks, you can start with a strong base, then add accents with purpose. A single, well-placed pop of color can be more powerful than a canvas full of competing hues. Lighting and shading is treated with a painterly sensitivity. The primary light source is usually warm, white or soft yellow, highlighting key areas like the face, hair or upper body. Shadows are often slightly more saturated and darker than the base colors, giving depth without losing harmony. Reflected light, often cooler in tone, can be added to separate forms and suggest atmosphere. The layering of light and shadow gives the artworks a dimensional, luminous quality. It's a reminder that light isn't just about brightness, it's about direction, intention and relationship to shadow. Lighting in art depends on how both light and dark interact. The shading can be more or less messy and soft depending on the illustrations. Some illustrations feature more contrasting, clear shadows with sharp outlines, while others have a lot softer shadow shapes with some blended painterly edges. Often a mix of both soft and more harsh shadows is included. Another common addition would be saturated borders along the outline of shadow areas. In some cases, they even feature bright neon tones. The turquoise tones that can be used for these especially stands out to me. It adds some interest and unexpected hue variation. Since more complex lighting can also be included, this can frame the characters in a way and add a lot of depth. When painting, it can help to think of lighting in steps: base, shadow, light, hue variation and saturated borders. Building it gradually rather than all at once mirrors how clarity in life often unfolds step by step, not in a single flash. Once again, here are shading layers I would use for a similar shading result to some of these illustrations. First a base layer, next a shadow layer, then since most of the illustration I am using as example here is in shadow, I went with the base tone in shadow. Due to this I am adding a light layer here. However, you could also use the light tone as the base color and make the base layer I used the first shadow layer, and then the shadow layer I added before the light layer here the second shadow color. As other layers I would then add a hue variation layer, including some yellowish tones in this case, and finally the saturated border parts. In the final illustration, the bow also has some texture added to it, which would lead me to the final aspect I'll mention in this analysis part, the extra effects. Finally, the backgrounds and effects tie everything together. The extra effects as well as the backgrounds can vary a lot depending on the illustration. Generally, they are rarely overcrowded. Instead, they support the figure through composition and atmosphere. Let's talk about the backgrounds first here. Some illustrations just have one flat color, others can have fully painted scenes or elements. The deep neon blue tones of the just colored backgrounds especially make the characters, who tend to have more white tones, stand out. When background elements are added, they usually frame the character and add some dynamicness to the image. Objects for scenes or elements that include props can be outlined or not outlined. Often the outlines for these are not as defined as for the character. Motion blur or just regular blur as well as glowing effects can also be added to enhance the depth in the illustrations. Particles are also included at times, adding some dynamicness. These are generally added in many illustrations. For some illustrations, more specific elements, such as floating water drops, pixelated hearts and stars or flower petals can be added. Overall, the dynamic elements and vibrant small accents as well as the atmospheric lighting add a lot of liveliness to the illustrations. What stands out here is restraint. The background never fights for attention, it elevates the subject. It's a visual reminder that not everything needs to be the main character. Supporting elements, when placed thoughtfully, make the focal point shine brighter. In drawing, this might mean simplifying the background to emphasize your subject. In life, it can mean creating space, physically or mentally, for what truly matters to stand out. Balance is needed for both a good composition as well as a fantastic artwork, which would be inspired by a fantastic life. How you live and view your life reflects in your art. So, what steps can you take? What do you need in life for it to be more meaningful and fantastic? I hope you can find the answer to this and live a more fulfilling, blessed life. Across all these elements, anatomy, face, eyes, hair, clothing, colors, lighting and effects, a shared principle comes into view: intentionality with room for wonder. Each decision, from a subtle cheek curve to a glow around the figure, serves a purpose while leaving space for interpretation. A fantastic feeling can be established through harmony, care and trust. This mirrors a deeper truth. When foundations are strong and intentions are clear, beauty often follows naturally. It doesn't need to be forced. Whether applied to art or life, this mindset turns the ordinary into something quietly extraordinary. Since we are already talking about application, let's see how these elements and thoughts could look like in an illustration. I'll go over the process of drawing my original character Yumari next. When starting the illustration, I began with a pose thumbnail. The pose is simple, with a slight head tilt to keep it interesting. I gave Yumari an upward gaze and a gentle smile, something that felt open and calm. The hair should flow softly around the face, adding movement, and the outfit has small formal touches like a collar and ruffles to make this fit to the aesthetics NAKDI sometimes incorporates. Sketching can be seen as a good way to understand the character. It's not about perfection, it's about filling out who they are. At this stage, it's easy to make mistakes. The proportions can be off and angles can look boring or awkward, but that's part of the process. You don't expect clarity at the start, you build toward it. In life, it's similar. Sometimes we only have a vague idea of where we're going, we might feel unsure, but that uncertainty doesn't mean failure, it's just the sketch phase of something greater. Every person starts somewhere and small beginnings can still lead to something fantastic. There are days when ideas don't come, when things feel stuck, and even when you want to give up, but it's often through those messy sketches, both on paper and in life, that we grow. Progress rarely looks clean. What matters is to keep drawing the next line, to keep showing up. Over time, the picture gets clearer. Once the sketch was done, I moved on to line art, using a mix of thin and thick strokes. The outer silhouette parts get thicker lines, while inner hair strands and details are thinner. You can also see that I tend to redraw a lot of lines until they look and feel right, because this stage defines the entire shape. Line art teaches patience. You learn that each stroke matters. Too light and it disappears, too heavy and it stiffens the image. The right balance creates a sense of flow, like quiet confidence. Life often asks for that same balance. Structure gives direction, but too much control can make things rigid. We need room to move, to breathe, to adjust when things don't go as planned. Something that can be interesting about line work would be that sometimes when you zoom in, you'll see imperfections like wobbles or edges. But from a distance, those small flaws blend into the bigger picture and can even make it look less stiff, more natural. It reminds me that in our own lives, we don't have to fixate on every imperfection. When you learn to accept life even with its imperfections, knowing you can never be perfect, but continually trying to improve, based on a solid foundation, your own overall line art of your picture of life can look pretty even if you make small mistakes at times. Sometimes the most fantastic lines aren't the perfectly steady ones, they're the ones that carry intention. It's okay to start shaky as long as the heart behind it is steady. For Yumari's colors, I went with soft purples, blues and pinks, tones that feel calm to achieve a soothing look. Colors can completely change how a character feels. Even the same pose can tell a different story just through the hues used. Adding color feels like breathing life into something. After all the planning and structure, it's finally time to see warmth and emotion come through. In a way, it's like finding joy again after a quiet or a difficult phase, realizing that life still holds color even when things seemed gray before. Sometimes it may not be easy to find that color, both in art and in life. We go through times that feel dull or heavy when motivation disappears, but those seasons don't last forever. Often they prepare us for the moments of light that follow. In art, you can repaint and readjust, trying out new tones. In life, you can do the same thing, change direction and rediscover what brings meaning. For the shading, I started with a basic block-in. The light source would be from the upper right, while shadows are at the bottom left in purples and blues. Yumari's gaze is toward the warm yellowish tone at the upper right. Blocking in shadows helps you to understand structure before adding details. It's similar in life. When you know where your light comes from before filling in everything, it's easier to make decisions based on this. You may not always know what the right answer would be, but knowing which direction you're facing, having that light source in life, helps with finding meaning and purpose no matter what happens. In life, light can represent guidance, clarity, truth, faith. It's important not to lose sight of it, especially when shadows grow stronger. I've noticed that when I rush the shading block-in step in drawing, everything can feel flat later. The same happens when we rush through challenges in life without understanding what they are teaching us. Taking time to study where the light falls and why it does this helps so that everything makes more sense. Every bright moment will cast a shadow, but that's what gives form. Embracing or knowing how to deal with both is what can help in both your artworks and in life. Now for shading, this stage took the longest. I added gradients and slight color shifts, layering hues until it looked balanced. For reference, I looked at a few of NAKDI's illustrations, noticing how the shading stayed light yet dimensional, with not too harsh shadows, just smooth transitions. I used color variations in the hair and face to give a lively but soft look, experimenting with blending modes towards the end to get the right effect. Depth usually doesn't come from doing everything perfectly the first time, it comes from trying, failing and learning. Shading shows you how patience pays off, how small, thoughtful actions build into something beautiful. Life works the same way. We learn to handle light and dark, joy and disappointment over time. Struggles are part of life on Earth. Without contrast, there's no shape, no story. It can be easy to lose hope in darker times, especially when things feel unclear or painful. Similarly to adding light layers over shadow, those moments can still become part of something meaningful. Sometimes we don't realize it until later, when we step back and see the whole image. For the background, I switched to Clip Studio Paint for a bit. After experimenting with several elements, I decided to keep it simple, using soft cloud textures from there and then manually adding in some floating shapes, as well as sparkles that frame Yumari. Simplicity can be powerful. It leaves space for the main focus to breathe. A calm background doesn't mean emptiness, it means peace. It gives room for the character to shine without distraction. The same applies to our environments, the people we surround ourselves with, the spaces we live in, the habits we keep. They all act like backgrounds to our story. Cluttered, noisy spaces can drown out what's truly important. But creating quiet, purposeful space, physically and mentally, helps us to focus on what really matters. There's also symbolism in effects, clouds, light sparkles. They all remind me of things that can't be fully held with their ethereal effect. In a way, they act as a counterpart to the things we can hold, which remind me of life's temporariness. Everything changes eventually, the possessions and time we have will fade, but instead of fearing this, we can appreciate it more deeply when we don't have to rely on these temporary things for our main foundation or light. When something feels fleeting, it can also feel more precious. A fantastic life doesn't come from holding everything tightly, it comes from learning to appreciate the glow while it lasts. After finishing the illustration, I stepped back to look at it critically. The first version felt too sharp in some areas. The lines around the shirt, for example, were harsh to me, making the artwork look flat. I realized I needed to soften the transitions between line and color, add more painterly elements, and fix small proportional issues like the eyes and shirt collar. I repainted sections, blended colors into the lines, and added not outlined flyaway hairs to give a more natural, airy feel. I also fixed symmetry in the face and improved the hand's shape. It took time, but each change brought the artwork closer to what I wanted it to be. Critique is often uncomfortable, but it's one of the most valuable steps, both in art and in life. It's the point where we admit something could be better and take the time to improve it. Sometimes in life too, we need to pause and reflect. Maybe there are habits or perspectives that need to be adjusted. Maybe there's something that's been weighing us down. Changing those things doesn't erase who we are, it refines us. Like editing a drawing, growth often happens through quiet revision and not in grand moments out of nowhere. The fantastic parts of life don't just appear, they're shaped by patience and small intentional acts of care. That's it for my illustration of Yumari. A fantastic life doesn't mean a perfect one, it's a life that keeps growing through realizing imperfections and striving to improve. Growth happens in persistence, in choosing to see hope even in uncertainty. Art reminds us that everything is temporary, a sketch can be erased, colors can fade, but while we're here we get to create, learn and find our purpose. That in itself is a gift. Whether you're drawing or doing anything else in life, remember that the process itself is worth appreciating. You don't have to rush to the final picture. Step by step, with each line and color, something fantastic can already take shape in your art and in you. You can find NAKDI's social media links in the video description. I definitely recommend checking out NAKDI's YouTube channel for more helpful advice. Doing this study was very insightful and I'm very grateful for being able to learn through NAKDI's artworks. I hope the video topic was helpful to you. It would mean a lot if you could leave a like and comment with the main thing you learned from this video or any other insights you have. On my Patreon, you can also find screen-recorded process videos of my art or more if you'd like to support me further. Thank you for watching, have a nice day, bye!